if the question is consistent with what I have. For the first question, I said in the business cycle model, consumption is more volatile than investment due to consumption smoothing. This is false, right? This is false because of the fact that investment is rather volatile compared to consumption, right? So if I'm to say investment is more volatile than consumption because of consumption smoothing, then it will be true. So if you just wrote false without any further explanation that is consistent with the statement made, the maximum you can get there is 0.5. So if you don't agree with the solution, please let me know, okay? So for that one, it's false. Now let me go to the second question. It says, it is not critical for macroeconomists to know the exact leading and lagging variables. This is equally false as well. So even though the leading and lagging variables does not tell us anything about those variables affecting GDP in any other way, what we learn from these variables happens to be that we can use them for forecasting. So when we know that this variable is leading, and today we realize that it's increasing, then we can project that indeed there might be some changes in GDP in the near future. So forecasting is of essence here, even though the leading variable does not indicate causality. Is that okay? If you have questions with that, let me know as well. So that's equally false. For the third question, a reduction in nominal interest rates will lead to reduction in price of credit card and increase in quantity of the credit. So this is false. Okay. The only, yeah.
So Jin asked, but this statement indicates from causation perspective, right?
Yeah. So from causation perspective, leading and lagging variables will not in any way affect GDP. It doesn't have any impact on GDP. But the thing is, as a macroeconomist, if a statistician is to come to you and tell you that, hey, if a variable is leading or lagging, it doesn't really tell you anything with regards to its relationship with its affecting GDP. You go like, yeah, that's true. But as a macroeconomist, I'm also interested in forecasting, right? So I would like to see whether I can forecast the future, see what the future variables are going to be, what the future GDP is going to be. So forecasting is of essence here. So a macroeconomist should be interested in forecasting. So he can use the leading and lagging variables to inform his forecasting decision. So if you are to read the book, and you go to chapter 3, let me point out to you guys. If you read the book and you go to chapter 3 of the book, and you go to, I believe, let me point out to Jane. Just give me a second. Yeah, so Jane, if you have this version of the book, okay. So let me read. An important element of co-movement is that the leading and lagging relationship that exists in macroeconomics. So if a macroeconomic variable tends to aid in predicting the future path of the GDP, then we say is a leading variable, right? So prediction is of essence and forecasting is of essence. So if it is known that some set of macroeconomic variables tend to be leading, the information can be very useful in macroeconomic forecasting, as timely information on leading variables can then be used to forecast the real GDP. So here I'm talking, this is where I'm coming from. Is that okay, Jen? Okay, sure. Lee, let me know if someone has any further questions. Is there anyone with questions, Lee?
No.
Okay. Let's go to the, so for the third question where I said a reduction in nominal interest rate will lead to reduction in prices. Yes, there's going to be reduction in prices, but there's not going to be an increase in the supply. So that will make it false as well. There's not going to be increase in supply, so that will make it false. Now let's go to the next question as well. So money is, yeah.
Sorry, could you actually explain that in just a little more detail, how the relationship between the nominal interest rate and the price for credit cards works?
Yeah, sure. So let's see what we have here. We have this guy here, remember? We have the supply. This is the quantity supply in the market. And then we realize that there's going to be a price. This is the price of the credit card, and this is the nominal interest rate, right? Is that okay? And this was the supply, the quantity determined in the market. This is the nominal interest rate. Now, what's the question again?
So a decrease in the nominal interest rate.
Yeah. So when nominal interest rate tends to come down, what happens to money demand? Right? The demand for money is going to increase because the opportunity cost of holding money is essentially zero.
Yeah.
Or it's going to reduce, right? So demand for money is going to increase. The demand for credit, what happens to the demand for credit?
Will decrease.
Yeah. So this guy is down. This guy comes down as well, right? This guy is here. There's going to be a reduction in the price of the credit card, but the supply of the credit card will equally come down. Right?
Oh, so Q and R move together?
Yeah, because that's where the equilibrium is being determined, right?
Oh, okay. So once the nominal interest rate increases or decreases, then the credit card cost will increase or decrease proportionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
If you want to see where I took it from, you can go to, I believe, chapter 12. Let me quickly see. Let me see whether that's consistent with chapter 12. That's chapter 12. Yep. Yeah. Let me fetch it for you. Hopefully I find it soon. Yeah, here. So this is where I'm talking from, right? This,
okay.
We go to 12.5 in the book, they looked at the effect of increasing nominal interest rates. So what we tend to see is that the prices of the credit card goes up. But here I'm looking at the opposite, and you tend to see that the supply comes down. Is that okay? Is that okay, John?
Sorry, I had my mic muted. Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, good. So if you have further questions, let me know. Lee, is there anyone with any question in there?
Yes. Someone asked if there is a shortage.
Yeah, there's going to be not shortage, but reduction in the quantity given. You can call it shortage, but technically that wouldn't be the right term for it. The reduction in just call it the reduction in the supply, the quantity supply. Yeah. Further questions, Lee?
Nope, we're good.
Good. Now let's go to the next question. It says that money is neutral in the real business cycle model because increases. Yeah. So this is a tricky one, unless of course you pay attention to it critically. So this can be true or it can be false. If you stick with this, can be true, it can be false. If you use the money model, the monetary model of intertemporal business cycle, then it's right. Increases in money supply will be met with increases in prices, and there wouldn't be any real impact in the labor market and in the goods market. You are accurate. But given the fact that we've gotten another view of the new Keynesian model, wherein we had a sticky price assumption, then this will be wrong as well. This is going to be a false statement. All right. So if you say true, obviously you are wrong. Is there anyone with any question? So this statement is true if only you stick with chapter 12. But if you are to read further with regards to chapter 13, then you tend to see that that's a false statement if you use the new Keynesian model. Yeah, Lee, questions?
Someone said that she thought that the real intertemporal model implies that it is not the new Keynesian model.
So remember, right, they had almost the same setup, right? They had all the intertemporal model had the same setup with the new Keynesian model. Everything was the same. It's just an assumption that was made, right? You just twist the assumption in terms of how the prices do behave, right? So we had the same supply market, we had the same goods market, we have the same labor market, we have the same money market. Nothing changed when we moved from chapter 12 to chapter 13. Nothing changed. But we had to switch an assumption in terms of how the prices do behave. And we introduce in how sticky prices do affect this market. And that's where the neutrality of money ceases to hold. So in this class, if someone is to come to you and tell you that, hey, as macroeconomists, we always believe that money is neutral, you are expected to give a different view. Go like, hey, but if you go with this particular assumption that the new Keynesian model held, then it is no more neutral. That's the perspective from which I'm looking at it from. Yeah, question?
So she further states that, but in the question, I'm pretty sure it says using the real intertemporal model. Does this name refer to either of the two models we are talking about?
Yeah, because they are all real, right? We have the real market in terms of the goods market. We have the real market in terms of the labor market, right? Yeah, so they are all real.
So Jane said that, was it specified that it was the sticky price model instead of the intertemporal model?
Yeah, so I kept it mute so that you guys will give me a different view. I wanted to see how comprehensive you guys think along those lines. So if I'm to come to you and then tell you that money is neutral, then are you going to stick with money being neutral without telling me that, hey, but if you go with this model, money is no more neutral? I just wanted to see whether you guys can give me a view as to how that one works. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just wondering if you take it from one perspective or another, but then discuss the potential for prices to be sticky or not sticky within your answer, would that suffice?
Yeah, you get a full mark.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned that whenever you introduce sticky price assumption, then this guy doesn't hold anymore, you get a full mark, regardless of whether you said true or false. As soon as you mention sticky price assumption, then I know you are looking at the non-neutrality aspect of money.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Lee, questions?
Someone said that they didn't say sticky price, but they said price ought to remain the same.
Yeah. If you assume that the prices don't change instantaneously, that's the same as sticky price, which will also give you the same results. Yeah, I didn't intend to make it confusing. I intended to see how comprehensive you guys think along those lines. So I might have to change the grading for that. Maybe when you write through and you just stick with the chapter 12 model, you get 1 out of 2. When you look at it from both perspectives, then you get a 2 out of 2. Is that okay?
I think we're good.
Okay. Let's go to the next model then. Without the exogeneity of money, so yeah, this guy is also equally false, right? This is equally false. The only aspect of the statement that makes it false is the fact that I use the word exogeneity of money supply. I should have used the endogeneity of money supply. That's the only difference. So when you are able to point out the fact that it should be endogenous instead of exogenous, then you get the full mark. Is that okay? So I'm talking about the last question where I said, without the exogeneity of money supply assumption from the central bank, it will be difficult for macroeconomists to explain the procyclicality of money supply and GDP growth. Yeah. So for that aspect of the question, you just have to say it should have been endogeneity of money, because remember Alex pointed out how money do move across time, and that has to do with endogeneity. Exogeneity means you just have the fixed money supply, it doesn't change. Endogeneity means that the central bank reacts to the changes in the money. Lee, question?
Yep. Will there be language used to differentiate RTM and RTM plus sticky price in future quizzes or on the final?
Yeah, I should think so. That will come from twisting the assumption or telling you guys clearly, hey, this is the assumption that I'm holding, right? So in this class, if you pay attention to the models that we've been using over time, they are all over the place, but you have to have a refined way of tracking them down. An example is from your last quiz where I pointed out the fact that increases in taxes, what will that lead to without increases in government expenditure, what will that lead to labor supply and all that? If you have to stick with one aspect of the book, you'll go like there will be an income effect and then individuals will work less. But if you are to look at it from the Ricardian perspective, then you go like, hey, then under the Ricardian, this guy wouldn't work. So I wanted you guys to have a very varied view of the topics and see how you can out your case whenever something comes up. So for the finals or for any particular midterm or final that's going to show up probably in the next few weeks, for the sticky price, as John asked, I might be specific, but this is the quiz and it's open-ended, and I wanted to see how you guys can track it now. Yeah. Okay. So if that's the case, we now have to open up the model. So we are now moving to, I believe, chapter 15. So let me see those who had that particular question right, so that I have a fair view of it. The one on sticky price, if you think you had it right, type yes. If you think you had it no, just type no. Let me see. Let me have a fair view of how confusing it was. Okay. 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 Good. It looks good then. I think it's 50-50. Yeah. So let's have a look at the next model that we have, and that will be chapter 15. So here we are going to open up the economy. So remember what we've been doing for the past I believe 8 weeks or so was the fact that our model was closed. And a closed model, we had, so this is chapter 15, and we are looking at the international trade. And for international trade, you for sure need to open up your model. You for sure need to open up your model such that you can trade with the rest of the world. So the very first place of call is the definition of your national income. So you have Y equals C plus I plus G plus E minus X. And this, or E minus I, or E minus X. Now this guy here happens to be our net export. So just to make things much easier, we might want to use the net export explanation. So let me, yeah, feel free.
Alex asked for the RBC handout. Do we need to worry about the firms? We just convert the household last time.
Oh yeah, so as I pointed out for the household, for the firm, it's just the same as the ones that we saw earlier. Nothing very interesting about them. So the firm is just the same as what we saw in the previous chapters for the RBC model, yeah.
So we don't
As-
need to read it?
Not really. So remember, this was just a pamphlet that I gave you guys, right? So if you are to read the pamphlet that I gave you, where I wanted you guys to pay much attention on is the household decision-making process, which is entirely different in terms of using the Lagrangian and solving it. That's why I concentrated on that. But with regards to the firm is just the same as what you saw in the previous chapters. So it's a bit it's consistent in terms of the firm, but in terms of the household, it's a bit difficult. So that's why I spent much time there. So I'll give you an example of how the firm also makes its decision, and you guys can clearly see that, hey, this is just the first order condition. Yeah, you just have to solve the household for the bonus. Yeah. Questions? Lee?
I think we're good.
Okay then. So we have this guy here. So in the previous model where we had our economy to be closed, because of the closed assumption, this guy was set to 0. But we are growing week by week. We are moving from having a very simple model to a more complicated model. We've now reached a point in time where, as macroeconomists, we are ready to solve questions that are related to a more broader economy. And with a more broader economy, this is an economy where a country can trade with the rest of the world. So net export is no more 0 because we now have an open economy assumption. So this guy is no more 0 because of the international trade aspect, or because of the fact that our economy is open to the world. So if that's okay with everyone, then we can start building up on the international trade front. To start with, one important idea to hold here is the fact that, remember that current account, if you go to the first chapter, chapter 1 and chapter 2, we tend to see that a definition was given to current account and it's related to the net export. So current account is basically the difference between your savings and your investments, or you might want to call it the sum of your net export and net factor from abroad. So given the fact that we are opening up the world to the world, and we now have net export, and net export is related to current accounts, why not use the current account idea and build up on this net export idea as well? So that's where I'm going to start from. I'll be using the very simple model that we saw in chapter 9, where we use a 2-period model. So let's start by looking at the 2-period model. We have an individual who has to make a decision, which is C. This is his consumption. This is just the 2-period model. And he has an income that has been given to him. But as we pointed out from the previous model, the 2-period model, the very simplistic one, we said the individual does some savings decision. So he saves a portion of his income. And at the same time, because we now have governments playing a role in this economy, there is going to be a government taking away taxes from this individual. So this is going to be the individual's decision-making budget constraint. Now we can clearly define this guy here to be the same as S equals Y minus T minus C. So this becomes the savings from the individuals, and the individual, remember, we call to be the private. This is a private individual who is making his decision as to how much to consume and how much to save. So this is the first part. Now let's go to the second part. Remember from the earlier chapter, from chapter 2, we made an assumption that for the market to clear, the government takes away taxes from us, which is its revenue, and this should be the same as the spending that it has. So the government spending is the same as the government taxes. However, it might be the case that the taxes that the government takes away from us is positive. That is to say, the government is not consuming all the taxes on expenditure, but it's rather saving portions of it. So this is the government saving. So we have the government saving, which is the difference between T and G. We have the private saving, which is just S. Now that we know the private saving and then the government saving, why not add the two together? So at the end of the day, we have the private saving plus the government saving, which will end up being Y minus T minus C minus or plus T minus G. So this is the total saving that we have in the economy.
Ella asked that, so we should write T equals G plus S in the first equation.
Where is that? Sorry.
In the first equation.
This guy here. This.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just using the equilibrium point of view where we have taxes to be the same as government, just to motivate that this is what we expect to happen. In a situation where it doesn't happen, then the excess can be called the government spending, the government saving, or the government borrowing. Yeah. So this is the ideal situation that we expect to see whenever we have a government in. But when we don't see that, then we can call that extra part to be government spending. So ideally, this guy should be zero. So when he's not zero and it's positive, then it's saving. If it's not zero and it's negative, then it is borrowing. So at the end of the day, we have the total savings in the economy, which I'll call with big S, to be the same as Y minus C, because the T cancels out, minus G. But remember the definition that we gave earlier for the national income accounting in terms of understanding what your current account is. So remember, we said current account is the same as the difference between your savings and your investment. But in this simple model, in the model that we saw in chapter 9, investment was set to zero, right? Investment was set to zero. So this guy is set to zero. So we have our current account to be the same as our savings, and our savings has been determined already. So our total savings, which is coming from both the private market and the government, has been determined, so we can confidently define the current account to be the same as the difference between the consumption and the government spending. So we've now defined how a current account should look in terms of savings, which is the same as Y minus C minus G. Now again, the reason why we have it in the form of current accounts is that we can clearly see, Lee, is there a question?
No, there isn't.
For sure? I thought someone typed.
No, there's no question.
Oh, okay. Let me quickly check. I think someone just typed. I don't know whether. Let me check. Or maybe it might be a private. Okay, let's go ahead. Sorry, it was a private message. Yeah. So this is what we have. So the reason why we have a current account is that, remember, the current account can be defined in two ways, either savings minus investment, or it can be said to be net export plus the net factor payment from abroad. And net factor payment from abroad is set to zero. So the current account can also be said to be the same as your net export. So this is how this equation is connected to the international trade, because the fact that we open up to international trade implies that we should have net export playing a role. And net export can be related to current account. If you have questions, please let me know. Questions? No questions, right? Lee?
No. Okay, so
Yeah.
Ella wants to confirm, we assume investment to be zero here?
Yeah, we assume investment to be zero when we use this simplistic model, which is the same as if you go to chapter 9, remember we started building up the model of a 2 period with no investment, right? So that's the same model that we are using here with no investment. But we now have to move to the model where we have an investment. And that will be the second part of today's discussion, where we have investment. There, you see the real part of the economy. Yeah, so but for now, investment is there. Lee, further questions?
And Alex asked, why is NX equals to S?
Yeah, so NX is the same as your net export, right? So anything that you don't consume, either you or the government doesn't consume, is set to go to the rest of the world. Remember, you're not investing, right? You're opening up to the world. Initially, you weren't opening up to the world. So it might be the case that you've produced something, you've not consumed everything, you save part of it. The government has also produced something, or the government might take taxes from us, but it didn't consume everything as expected. Now, where does this extra output go to? Initially, in the closed economy, we don't have to consider the fact that this extra output goes to the rest of the world. No, because it's impossible. But now that we've opened the world we've opened our economy to the world, then we can consider the possibility that this extra output might be transferred to the rest of the world. Question?
Alex asks, are we considering people safe in terms of export?
You might want to call it export, or you might equally want to call it import, because remember, this S can be positive or it can be negative. Yeah. John, another question, Lee?
Yeah. So what happens when we have net imports? Is that we have an output shortfall?
Yeah, you borrow. Yeah, you borrow. In that case, you borrow. Remember, these are variables. They can be positive or they can be negative. Yeah. Questions?
I think we're good.
Oh, good. Then let's quickly go to, so we've now defined what our total export is. We've now defined what our current account is. Why not consider the situation that we had earlier? So let's use this simple model and determine the lifetime budget constraint of this entire economy. Remember, this guy is open up to the world. It involves both the private and then the government. So let's use a simple model where we use in getting the intertemporal model and build up on that to involve both the governments coming in to make its consumption decision as well. So initially we have this simple model. An individual has something that we call C. I might want to call this C to be C total. By C total, it's no more an individual. I'm now considering both the fact that there might be a private individual and a government. So this C total is coming from the consumption by the household, which is C. And the consumption from the government, what will be the consumption for the government? Can anyone help me with the variable as a G? Good. Right? So this is what I mean by CT. So the consumption plus savings, which is the savings total. Remember, this guy was said to be the same as Y. Then we went a step further to say that consumption total for tomorrow is going to be the income that I have for tomorrow plus 1 plus R, the savings that I have as of yesterday, which is the savings total for yesterday. Then we did 1 or 2 manipulations, put this ST here, replace this equation. We end up with a very simple equation that looks like CT plus CT prime over 1 plus R equals Y plus Y prime all over 1 plus R. This was the lifetime constraint that we saw. If you have questions, please let me know. But remember, as Ella and the other guys pointed out, CT is just the same as C plus G. So this constraint now looks like this. The consumption for tomorrow also looks like C prime plus G prime all over 1 plus R, which is the same as Y bar 1, Y bar 1 plus R. So you can draw this guy on the graph, and that's a graph that you saw, you will see in chapter 15. One thing I would like to point out, and that'll be back to what Alex asked, is that this guy here, I can replace him with what? Can someone help me? What can I replace with ST? Exactly. I can replace him with CT. I can replace this guy here with CA, which is the same as the current account position. And I can replace this guy as well with CA, which is the same as the current account position. So we can now get a refined equation that captures both the consumption of the private individual and the consumption of the government. And we can have their lifetime constraint, and we can draw this constraint on the graph. If you have questions, please let me know. Questions, Lee?
Very good.
Good. So we are done with this guy. If you want to draw the graph, is there anyone who wants to see how the graph was drawn, or is that okay with you guys? So that I can move to the next one. If you want to see how the graph was derived, just let me know. You want us to draw? Good. So let's see how we draw it. So remember, to draw any graph for this course, there are two time periods. You might want to call this guy here the current time period. And you might want to call this guy here the future time period, right? And they make their decision based on consumption. So we saw a situation where C plus G plus C prime plus G prime all over 1 plus R equals Y plus Y bar all over 1 plus R. This is the equation that we saw. Now come to think of it, he makes a decision as to how much to consume for today and how much to consume for tomorrow. So ideally, it's in our best interest to put today on one side and tomorrow on the other side, depending on how you want to go with it, right? So if you look at the graph critically, you can move tomorrow to this side. So I cancel this guy, I make him minus. This guy is already positive, this guy is this. I asked myself the first question. What will be the consumption for today? I think this is C plus G, and this is C prime plus G prime. What will be the consumption for today if this guy here, consumption for tomorrow, is set to 0? The maximum that I can get here for this current era is just going to be Y plus Y bar all over 1 plus R. That's the maximum consumption that I can get when I set this guy to 0. The same question applies to this side of the equation. What will be the maximum consumption that I will get for tomorrow when I set today's consumption to 0? So this guy goes to 0, this guy moves to this side, I do a couple of manipulations, and I end up with the final aspect of it. I believe it's just going to be Y plus 1 plus R plus Y prime. That's the maximum consumption that I can have for tomorrow whenever I set today's consumption to 0. And I end up with this line here. If you have questions, please let me know. Lee, is there anyone with any question in there?
No, we're good.
Good. Now let's do a couple of comparative stats as to how this thing do change in the economy. So we now know what the consumption is. We now know what the savings is. We now know the lifetime budget constraint. So this is equally consistent with what we saw earlier. So what will be the first comparative stat? Yeah, John had a question.
What was the maximum on the y-axis? It was a
axis. Remember, we had today's consumption to be C plus this equals minus 1 plus minus C prime plus G prime, right? All over 1 plus R plus Y prime all over 1 plus R. So the maximum on the y-axis implies that this guy is 0. Is that okay, John? Implies that this guy is 0, right? Is that okay, John? Okay. If this guy is 0, then I can move this guy to this side of the equation. I now have C prime plus G prime all over 1 plus R equals Y plus Y prime all over 1 plus R. Now I just want C prime plus G prime on the x-axis. So I move this guy to this side. So this guy goes away. He comes and multiplies this guy with 1 plus R. He multiplies this guy with 1 plus R. So this guy goes away, this guy goes away. So it becomes Y prime plus 1 plus R Y. Is that okay, John? That will be the maximum on the y-axis.
I think we're good.
Okay, good. So let's do a couple of comparative stats here and let's see what comes out of it. The first comparative stats, as in what happens to the consumption whenever we have a situation where the income increases. Whenever income increases, what happens to savings? And again, remember, savings is the same as our current account here. So instead of saying savings, I'm going to use the word current account. What happens when our income increases today? The first question here is, what happens to our consumption? Anyone to help me? And remember, our consumption CT is a combination of G and C. Our consumption increases. Okay. Now the question here is it going to increase at the same level as the increase in Y? If yes, why? If not, why not? Is it going to increase at the same level as the increase in Y? No. Why? Exactly. Due to consumption smoothing, right? So this guy will increase, but less than increase in Y because of consumption smoothing. Because of the consumption smoothing idea, it will increase less than the increase in Y. Now, where will the extra go? Where will the extra go? Future or exactly savings, right? And savings is the same as the current account. So the extra Y will go to the current account. So when I live in an economy and I'm open up to the world and I have a situation where the income has increased, then there's a more likelihood that I can export the excess to the world in terms of savings. Or you might just want to call it savings. But for now, we are open up to the world, so we need to enrich our vocab. Is that okay? We'll be going for a, yeah, I think it's almost time. Let me do let me do this. Let me finish this comparative stats, then we'll go for 5 minutes break, then we'll come back. What happens to this guy if the expected future income is supposed to increase? So if I expect future income to increase, what happens to the current consumption?
We have a question.
Sure, feel free.
Will there ever be a model that indicates investment? And if so, would this increase be split between investment and export or import?
Yeah, there will be a model where we consider investment. I believe that will be the next model that we'll be looking at. But again, you might want to call investment as the net savings, right? So it doesn't really make much in terms of that, right? Investment is just the same as the difference between savings and when you subtract investments from savings, you might want to call it net savings. So it doesn't really make any much of a difference. Is that okay? because here we are not really taking a stand as to where the excess is going to, so there's not much to worry about. Yeah. So when you expect future to increase, future consumption to increase, today's consumption will increase as well. But how will today's consumption increase? It is only possible because individuals will have to borrow. And in that case, the current account will come down. So just let me be sure whether you guys understand that. You expect your future income to increase, you will go and borrow today against future. And you can only borrow, which implies that your current account is going to come down. Your savings is coming down, which is the same as your current account. So let me know whether that's okay with you guys as well. Taxes. Increase in taxes will just lead to the Ricardian equivalence, because increase in taxes will lead to savings in one aspect increasing, and it will lead to savings in another aspect reducing. So they will just cancel out. Ricardian equivalence, whatever, it just goes to zero. There's no impact on the current account when the taxes increase. Now, the situation where this is going to be different. The situation where I have CA to be less than zero. What position will this be? Think about it in terms of chapter 9. When you have a current account position to be negative, what would you like to call that particular country? Importing, correct? Or borrowing, correct, right? So this is a situation where the country borrows or imports. So both. Now the question here is, what happens to this guy when interest rate goes up? So you now know the position of the country. This country happens to be a net borrower. What happens to him when the interest rate increases? Will it go up or down? Will the net export goes up or down? Will it come down or up? You borrow less. Yeah, you borrow less. So that is to say, you might have to increase your current account. So it will you have to start increasing your savings, or increasing your current account, because you are at a disadvantaged position. Is that okay? And you might want to look at a situation where it is on the other side. When you have a situation where this guy is greater than zero, it means you are a lender or a saver, right? So when this guy goes up, the effect here is ambiguous. This is ambiguous because there's going to be income effect and substitution effect affecting one another. So this will be the last part of the discussion. Write your full name and write present. Write your full name and write present. And go for 5 minutes break, and let's be back at around 10:50. Okay, let's be back at around 10:50. And yeah. Okay, are we back, guys? Are we back? Okay, Lee, if you guys happen to find yourselves here, just type your full name and type present. And again, when you come in late, I probably have to delete it. Okay, yeah, so just type in your full name and type yes, and we'll go with that. And sorry to those who had the other question to be a bit confusing. Hopefully next time we find a better way of solving it. Sorry about that. I looked at those who responded yes, it was encouraging as well. So that's good news. And for the finals, particular question is not clear, please draw my attention and I can come in and explain it further. So for the attendance, as I pointed out the last time, please and please again, the file that has been sent out as the final attendance list, if you count yourself and the mark does not tally, then contact your TA. If you count yourself and then the mark tallies, but you think that you need extra marks, then that's not a reasonable ground to seek for additional mark. Just make sure that your name do appear in all before you send an email to me or to your TA. In fact, don't send it to me, just send it to your TA because he's the one who records it. So just keep that one in mind. And for those who took the quiz, as I said earlier, I am very particular about fairness. So if a quiz is set to be at 9:30 today and I have individuals coming in to write, if you come in with any other excuse that is not tangible, I mostly overlook your excuse because I don't want a situation where I create an advantage for some students where they can come in and write their exams at any time of their choice, whilst others do have to wake up so early and go through that difficult moment and write the exam, which might equally affect their grade. So I don't have a situation where I create extra exams for a student who comes in with any extra excuse, be it my internet is not working, or be it I overslept, or be it I don't have any extra ground for makeup. If you are sick or you are traveling or you have any tangible reason, then of course I'll make room for you. So please keep that one in mind as we approach towards the finals, because excuses might come up. So just be sure as to what excuse you might want to give for missing an exam. So let's start. Lee, is there anyone with any question in there before we start with the second model?
We're good.
Okay, then. Let's go to the second model. Yeah. So model 2. So back to LS question. With this model, there's going to be investment. This is unlike the model that we saw in chapter 9. This is the model that we saw. This is going to be the model that we tackled in chapter 11. Then the temporal model, where there is investment, there is labor market, there is goods market, there is money market, and all that. So this is just going to be that particular model that we saw. So there's going to be 1 or 2 adjustments to that model. So if you look at the equation that I sent out, with that model, we had the labor demand or the output demand to be driven from consumption as a function of interest rate. We had investment as a function of interest rate. We have a government spending. And now, because of the fact that we've opened up our economy to the world, there's going to be a net export, which is the same as our current account, given the fact that the net factor product from abroad is 0. Keep an eye on this guy here. So imagine a situation where we drill the goods market, we have the interest rates here, we have the output here. And then we had the output demand equation, which is YD, which was here. And we came up with the output supply, which is equally given to us here. And they were both a function of interest rates. At the end of the day, in a situation where this guy wasn't available, then this becomes the first line. In the situation where this guy comes in, then we need to make 1 or 2 changes. So this interest rate was the interest rate that we saw in the domestic market. And this equation is the one that we saw where C equals I plus G. So this becomes the demand, this becomes the supply in the closed market. When we open up our economy to the world, there are 2 things that will play out. We might come up with a different demand function that looks like this, wherein our YD will be the same as C plus I plus G plus net export. Here, our net export will be greater than 0. Which implies we have an increment in the demand. There's an additional factor that shifts our demand further out. And that factor is the positive net export that we have. If that's the case, then this guy here becomes a new interest rate, which we call R star. And this interest rate is the interest rate of the world. And you don't have much control on this interest rate, because it's almost like you living in a very big society. You are a very tiny portion of it, and you don't have control over prices or interest rates. Yeah, the lead question.
Yeah, is this a small open economy?
Yeah, this is a small open economy. Yeah, you open it to the world. The green line, though, the black line is the same as the closed economy, but the green line is the open economy. Question?
Very good.
Okay. Within the same open economy, we might have a situation where your position as a net exporter is negative. That means you borrow a lot from the world. So this becomes C plus I plus G plus net export. Here, your net export is negative. In that case, this becomes a new interest rate. But remember, this will be the interest rate of the world as well. You don't have any control over it. So this is the interest rate of the world. This is the interest rate of the world. This will be the domestic interest rate. So just make sure you have these two ideas in mind. Lee, question?
Yes, is this graph for SOE or world?
For what?
I think small open economy or world. Is this
Or row. What do you mean by row? Sorry.
world?
I don't get.
World?
Can you please read it for me again? Sorry.
Graph for small open economy or is it for the whole world?
Remember, an open economy is the world, right? You open up to the world. So they are tantamount. They are just the same. Yeah, it is small, but you are open up to the world. So within that small society that you find yourself, right? That's the world that you find yourself in. But you cannot affect, the most important assumption here is within that small society that you find yourself in, within this small world that you find yourself in, you cannot affect interest rates. It is predetermined. So think of world as a small society that they all find themselves in, even though it's a small economy. Question?
Yes, but why is the equal interest rate is world interest rate?
Yeah, because you've opened up to the world, right? Because you've opened up to the world, because you're now trading with the rest of the world, the assumption is that the interest rate that will be determined after we inject in net export and net import is no more a domestic one. It's no more influenced by domestic activities. This is more or less like a disentangled society. Now everybody's working with everybody, so why not assume a particular interest rate that everyone faces?
He said that his understanding is that the interest rate for a small open economy can be different from world interest rate. So the equilibrium interest rate will only for the small open economy world interest rate will be given. So I think what he meant is, so the world interest rate is given, but this is just the small open economy interest rate.
Yeah. So we might want to take it as that. It's consistent. The most important thing here is the fact that you as an individual, you don't have any control over this particular R star. That's what I want
So
to.
it's not necessary to be the same.
You said?
So the small open economy equilibrium interest rate and the real interest rate does not need to be the same.
It should be the same, but if you have a bit of difficulty in trying to reconcile the two, think of it this way. The world interest rate, or the interest rate that we find ourselves in whenever we open up ourselves to the world, regardless of whether we are a small economy or whatever, the fact that it is open implies that this particular interest rate is more or less like you being a price taker, just like what John pointed out. So if you are a price taker, you don't have control as to whether you can increase the interest rate or reduce the interest rate just by looking at your own activity. So internally, your activities cannot change this interest rate. So in chapter 11, your activities in terms of you shifting this guy to this side and this guy to this side can affect this interest rate. But here, this interest rate is always fixed. You cannot change it, regardless of you increasing your YD or not. You cannot change it. So that's what I want you guys to pick up. This this RD or this R to the world cannot be changed by you shifting your YD or YS. And I think we'll come back to that very soon.
So, okay, that's a really long question.
Sure.
In this model, just as in the previous one, the small open economy faces a given real interest rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the chapter 11, output supply is given by the upward sloping curve YS in figure 16.7.
Yeah.
However, we assume that goods can be freely traded with foreign countries. So
yeah, you can trade with the foreign country. You can do whatever you want to do. You can shift your YD to the left. You can shift your YD to the right. When you do this, when you shift your YD to the left and YD to the left, under chapter 11, which was a closed economy, your interest rate will change. But here, when you shift your YD and your YS, the interest rate will forever be the same interest rate that you inherited from the world because you are a price taker, right? So just keep that one in mind. The interest rate is just fixed. It doesn't change.
Okay, so a question from Tanya. If we start exporting more than importing, are we able to move from the lower real interest rate to the higher real interest rate?
That's a good question. No. That's what I wanted to point out. No.
So what it means is, since it's an open economy, it has to be a price taker.
Exactly.
From the world. But since it is really small, it cannot affect the
yeah, exactly. Because you are just a small player. So regardless of how much you increase your net export or how much you increase your net import, this R star, just like what Tanya was asking, will forever be there. It will, if for instance you started here, it will forever be here. It wouldn't change, regardless of whether you shifting this guy to this side or shifting into this side. It will forever be here. Right? So that's what I would like you guys to pay attention to as we move on and do towards tackling the comparative stats. Here, the interest rates will forever be there, and we have to make a further assumption as to why we have the interest rates being there forever. Question, Alex?
So only the graph interaction point changes?
Yeah, only the shift in the graph, it will go to this side, to go to that side. But at the end of the day, regardless of the shift, we have to make further adjustments such that the world interest rate will forever be there. It will forever be where we met it. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone missed the first part of the class due to a family matter that he have emailed you. So he want to know if is it possible to.
Yeah. I don't know how the class will take it, and as I pointed out, I'm a bit hesitant in giving extra quiz stuff. I don't know. I probably have to look at it again, but for now, the rest of the class, I do think about them, especially the guy who had the lowest mark, perhaps in this particular quiz. I probably have to look at his performance and see how I can either give chance to those who weren't able to do it or not. If, for instance, I give us any extra quiz and the extra guys get much more than someone who devoted his time, but he wasn't fortunate, then there's an issue. I wouldn't want to do that. So I'll look at it again. If there is anything I can consider, I'll let you guys know. But for now, the principle still holds. Right?
We're good.
Okay. So again, Alex, please keep in mind that this guy will forever be here. And again, please ask questions if you have any. So given the fact that we now understand that this world interest rate is just like you being a price taker, it has to be there regardless of what happens. Let's see a couple of comparative stats that we can do with it. So let me see which one I can go with first in terms of, yeah. Which one should I go with first? I don't want a situation where, yeah, I can still go with the first one in the book. So let's take the situation where we had, we have the same model. Remember, we are now open to the world. We have YD here. We have YS here. Your individual activities cannot change the interest rates in the world now, because this is the world interest rate, because we are open out to the world. Now, this is the amount of output that we have in equilibrium and what's not. Is that okay? Is that okay? Questions? Now let's do a comparative start where this world interest rate has changed. For instance, I have a situation where I have 10 countries in this small open economy. I have 10 countries. I'm just one out of the 10. The rest of the 9 countries have experienced a shock in their output. And because of that, all the 9 countries have realized a reduction in their output. The question here is, what happens to the interest rate? Technically, the interest rate is supposed to reduce. If all the 9 have the same shock and their output is down, then it affects the rest of the world, and the interest rate of the world is going to go up, or perhaps it's going to go down. Is that okay? This will be our initial assumption. There is an increase in the world interest rate. There is an increase in the world interest rate. So this was the initial world interest rate, and there is an interest rate that has been, this world interest rate has now increased because of this shock, which affected the other 9 countries, and their output came down, and the interest rate for the world has to now adjust up. So this is the new world interest rate, which has gone up. Alex? Alex? Yep.
Increase R caused by YS reduced?
Yeah,
or...
why using, yeah. Just like chapter 11, whenever there is a reduction in supply, the interest rate will go up, right? Chapter 9, imagine everybody has a reduction in supply, interest rates will equally go up. So this same model, just a quick review. We have demand, we have supply, we have interest rates here, we have outputs here. When supply reduces, interest rate goes up. This is my initial interest rate. It will now go to R2. Can you see? Can you see? Can you guys see?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So if the rest of the 9 countries have experienced a shock and their output is down, then the world interest rate goes up. Now, coming back to what I was trying to stress on, back to what Tanya asked, back to what John asked, back to what Alex asked. Because we find ourselves in this open economy, we don't have control over the world interest rate. We for sure have to keep our demand and supply such that the world interest rate is being maintained. So the question here is, if this happens to be the initial world interest rate, and it has now increased to R2, we need to do something to our YD such that we come back to the world interest rate that is always given to us, that we always have to maintain. One possible way to do that, and that is the way that we need to do in this model, is to increase our YD such that we maintain the world interest rate that has been assumed now. So we now have a new YD that comes up to the world interest rate that has been given. We don't have any control over. So whenever it changes, we need to shift our YD such that we maintain that world interest rate. Is that okay?
I think we're good.
Okay, good. So given that, with this increase in interest rates, at the end of the day, this guy goes up and we have this. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves here is, what will account for this shift from YD1 to YD2? A couple of factors. It might be the case that
Alex asked why don't we decrease YS to maintain R?
Yeah, because remember, that's a good question. But remember, because we've opened up the economy to the world, and the fact that the NX is our point of focus, right? NX is where our point of focus is coming from. That's why we just have to tackle it from the NX perspective. And NX always affects YD, right? NX is always coming from YD perspective. That might be the easier way of maintaining this guy. Is that okay? Yeah, so was it John or Alex?
It's Alex.
Okay then. So this is what we saw here. Now, what will explain this shift? Now, first of all, who can tell me what happens when this guy moves to this side? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? Export increases, right? So the first thing that comes to mind is that export increases. The net export increases. The first thing that comes to mind is the fact that, oh, can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that the net export increases. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Now, what is the story that will help us justify this? The story is that the rest of the world do have a productivity shock. Their supply is extremely low. They don't have any output. Now, we don't have any shock. We've experienced that we can now supply to the rest of the world. So our export will tend to increase. Because they are in trouble, we are exporting more to them. That's one part of the argument. Another part of the argument is that, remember, just a quick note, another part of the argument is that YC plus I plus G plus NX. So we've been able to explain this shift from NX moving up. Another part of the argument is that investment is also a part of interest rates. Whenever interest rates increases, what happens to investment? Anyone to help me? What happens to investment? Exactly, it goes down. So this guy also is expected to go down. Now, what happens to consumption when interest rate goes up? Anyone to help me? For consumption, there are two effects. There's an income effect and there's a substitution effect. Substitution effect will allow consumption to come down, and income effect will allow consumption to go up. Given the fact that Y has increased, there's going to be an income effect. So for consumption, we don't know. It's ambiguous. This guy comes down, our net export is expected to go up. So that will explain this guy maintaining this world interest rate. That will be the first explanation. Do we have questions?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Consumption, which change comes first?
You said?
So for the consumption, is the income effect or substitution effect?
They cancel out, right? The income effect, remember with this particular shift, the income is expected to increase. With income effects, you increase your consumption. But at the same time, as the world interest rate is up, you don't want to consume more because you like to get the substitution effect as well. Questions, Lee?
So we can think of NX as saving?
Yeah, NX is the same as saving, just like what you pointed out. And saving is the same as the current account. And current account is the same as net export. If we assume the net factor from abroad to be 0.
And so our increase make people save more?
Yeah, that will be the substitution effect. But at the same time, there's going to be an income effect where they would like to consume more as well. So that will be ambiguous.
Could we also use fiscal policy to increase G?
Yeah, you can. You can use fiscal policy to increase G, but it comes with its own implications. When you use fiscal policy to increase G, you by increasing G, it means taxes will also have to increase. And as you increase taxes, then the net supply will also have to be affected. So I'll come back to how that works as well. So in that case, you don't see a direct shift to maintain this world interest rate, right? Yeah. Questions?
Very good.
Okay, then let's quickly, let's go to the next comparative stats. So just keep in mind the interest rates, how it affects these guys. And just so you guys remember, this is going to be very important. This world interest rate is always given to us, it's fixed. So we have to adjust our YD such that it is being maintained. Okay. Now let's go to the next comparative stats. Let's see how that works. The next comparative stat, I believe, happens to be the situation where we had, so that's coming back to John's question where he proposed an increase in G. So let's look at the comparative stats that has an increase in G. So there's a temporal increase in G. Let's see how that affects the economy. So start by looking at these guys again. This is my YD. Remember, this is an open economy. This is my YS. This is my open economy as well, right? This is my interest rates to the world interest rate. So just so we get the sense of it, remember, when the government increases its spending, due to the Ricardian, due to the equilibrium position that we expect the government to have, it should be the case that the government will equally go with, increases in taxes. As the government increases taxes, for the household to maintain the amount of consumption that it has, it should be the case that the household might be interested in increasing the labor supply that it has, so that it can maintain the amount of consumption that it always wants to have. And with an increase in this guy, then it should be the case that YS will also increase. Is that okay with everyone? So that will be the first part of our argument. So given this transition process, then this is what John was seeing. This is the perspective from which John was trying to tackle it from. There's going to be an increase in supply. Supply goes up and output also increases, right? This is what we expect to see. But again, because we are open to the world, there are a couple of things that we need to know. Yeah. I'm going to look at the YD right away. Again, because we are open up to the world, there are a couple of things that we need to know. Unlike chapter, I believe chapter 11, where with increase in G, you might come in and tell me, hey, then also I expect YD to increase, and at the end of the day, I might get this world interest, I might get this interest rate. You might be right. If you propose this solution for chapter 11, you might be right. But you are wrong in this chapter. Why would you be wrong if you draw the green line? Anyone to help me? Why would you be wrong if you draw the green line? Exactly. We need you to be at exactly the same point as where the world interest rate is. So whenever you are about to draw your green line, it should be the case that you aim for a place such that the green line will go with the exact red line such that the world interest rate is maintained. So that was my argument, because it's given. You don't change this world interest rate. Is that okay, Tanya?
I think we're good.
Okay then. So this is what happens. So we have a situation where, unlike chapter 11, we now have the world interest rate being maintained here, and this will be the increase in YD. So YD will now move to this side, YD2. And why do we see this increase in YD? One aspect of it is whenever G increases, remember Y equals C plus G plus G plus net export. Plus net export. With this, can someone tell me what happens to investment? Yeah, this is going to be, yeah. Can someone tell me what happens to investment? That'll be my first point of call. Can decrease? Okay. Can someone tell me nothing? Nothing happens to investment. Absolutely nothing, right? Why? Why? Because the world interest rate is being maintained. And investment is a function of interest rate. And interest rate would not have been changed. So the investment is just the same. Nothing happens to it. Right? Yeah. So with this increase in G increases. But remember, we expect the increase in G to be greater than the increase in YS. If that is the case, then this green line should move much further to this direction. Why is it here? We should expect the green line to be somewhere here. We should expect it to be somewhere here because we expect the direct impact on YD to be higher than the direct impact on the YX, which implies we expect this guy to be somewhere here, which might have given us a higher interest rate. But now, because we have a world interest rate, we are limiting the increase to just this side. Can someone propose why we had this reduced increase? Exactly, because YS reduced, NS reduces. Correct. Because NX reduces. So when G increases, couple of factors, the amount of export also the net export reduces. Why? Take an example like Canada. We are interested in, the government is interested in spending the more, right? It's interested in spending on hospitals, it's interested in building roads and what have you. The idea here is it will import more of its labor workers from outside. It will import more of its input from outside to help facilitate this extra spending, right? Is that okay? So if a government is interested in spending more, and you for sure they don't have enough within the domestic economy, where would they take it from? They will obviously take it from outside. And by taking it from outside, it means they are importing in more. And as you import more, your net export is down. That's one explanation. Now type your full name and type present before we move along. Type your full name and type present before we move along. Yeah. So that's one, that's another aspect of it. And you can read the next two chapters, the next two diagrams, see how it works. I can use the next 5 minutes to explain it, but it's already 2025. Some of you might be in a hurry. So this will be the chapter on international trade. This will be the last part of chapter 15. Next week, I'll start looking at chapter 16. So when you read the chapter, couple of things you need to note. You don't need to look at the credit market because we didn't look at it. Sorry, you have a question, John? Lee?
Yeah, does that mean that the increase in taxes is not exactly the same as the increase in government spending because we use import for some of that?
Yeah, remember the increase in taxes affects how much an individual would like to work, and how much you would like to work is a bit muted in terms of its effect on the amount of supply. So it's not as direct on the supply side. Do you get it? So the amount of supply increases, but not that much. However, the amount of the demand side is direct because G goes up, YD should go up at the same proportion. Is that okay, John? Yeah. So feel free, hopefully when you have further questions, we might tackle them next week. So when you read this chapter, the next, questions?
What about consumption? So G increase, T increase, pi, T decrease, C decrease.
Yeah, T goes down, yeah? C equally goes down, right? Because the income effect, first of all, you might want to say that when taxes increase in the economy, individuals might feel a bit less rich as they used to be, so they might be careful as to how much they would like to consume. But remember here, the effect on the consumption is not coming from interest rates, just like what Alex asked. Interest rate is kept fixed, so there's no interest rate effect on the consumption. The only effect on the consumption is the fact that maybe the household might feel a bit poor and they would like to reduce the amount of consumption that they have, given the fact that the taxes have increased. Is that okay? Okay, sure. So feel free, when you read the chapter, look at the next two graphs in terms of increase in Z prime, in terms of increase in current Z, and I think the last one will be in terms of increase in capital, and that would just be it. Read along those lines and let me know if you have further questions. Right? If you have questions, let me know. If not, hopefully I see you guys on Tuesday. Questions?
Will you post something on Canvas so we can hand in the bonus mark from last class?
I will do that. I will do that.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The deadline is supposed to be on Tuesday before class. I'll try as much as possible to do that by the close of today.
And someone asked you to get back to their email after class because it's really important.
Okay, sure. Further questions? Was that it?
So only solve for intertemporal decisions, intratemporal decision, right?
Both the intertemporal decision making between consumption today and consumption tomorrow, intertemporal decision making between amount of labor supply today and then the amount of labor supply tomorrow, then intratemporal decision making between the amount of consumption versus the amount of labor. So I believe 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. Questions? All good, Lee? Okay. Thank you very much, Lee. I'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.